Thank you very much for joining us for this afternoon session. I'm really honored to chair this session about practices and the feedback and learnings from both the research and also from the field. How to put in place carbon farming on a farm, what levers and barriers. I will start immediately by presenting our panelists who will have a 10-minute presentation. First of them, Jocelyn Guinche, whom you've already met this morning. He was in the introductory panel. So Jocelyn is a farmer, and with his colleague, who must be in the room, he is breeding porks and cattle in Limousin in France, and he decided to start his farming activities with his colleague whom he met at engineering school. They had a mixed farm with plant and animal, and they have introduced a lot of carbon farming practices, which he will present later on. We also have Celia Ruot from Agrosolutions. She's an agricultural engineer at Agrosolutions, which is a consulting firm, and she supports all kinds of agricultural players in the carbon farming transition, from defining their strategy to the monitoring, reporting and verification. She's currently part of the Mavic project and works on drafting carbon farming methodologies. Then we will have Mathieu Nogues from INRAE. He's the project officer at INRAE, and he's currently working on the ORCaSa project within the coordination team. I'm just smiling because we work together. And as part of this project, we will launch the Soil Carbon International Research Consortium, from which you will hear tomorrow morning. And he has contributed to that launch and the development of the Impact for Soil knowledge platform that he will show this afternoon. Then we have Anais from IDELE. Anais Lot, and Anais holds a master's degree from AgroParisTech, and after a final year internship in the field of agricultural development in Armenia, she worked at the French Grassland Association and then joined the climate department of the French Livestock Institute, IDELE, in 2021. Anais has managed a European live carbon farming project for 3 years, and also participates to the Climate Farm Demo project, which is a Green Deal project. Then Niamh is there as well, and Niamh from Teagasc, Ireland. She's a research officer with Teagasc Ireland, and is working within the ClieNFarms project, within the communication and dissemination team, and specifically, she is coordinating the creation of micro-learning contents across Europe to facilitate the delivery of blended learning. We will hear about that later on. Then Natasha Brown from Teagasc. She is a climate sustainability technologist at Teagasc, primarily project managing AgNav, a sustainable tool for Irish farmers. Natasha previously managed the dairy and beef networks for Teagasc as part of the ClieNFarms projects, and led the creative arenas for Ireland. So creative arenas is what we will hear about. And then Laurene Lebelt from Climate-KIC. After academic training in environmental policy and environmental science, Laurene joined Climate-KIC's team in Paris to work on innovation in support of climate action. She now co-leads Climate-KIC Agri-Food theme and works on EU projects like ClieNFarms, for instance, that supports system transformation and collaboration across research, policy, and value chain actors. As part of the ClieNFarm and Climate-Farm demo projects, she specializes in developing scaling approaches for the adoption of climate-smart agriculture and builds synergies across initiatives. Then we had a last speaker, Laure Nitschelm from Arvalis, which is the Plant Institute in France. She is a research and development engineer for the environmental assessment of cropping system. She isn't there for a personal reason, but she asked us to excuse her, and Laurene will present her conclusions and recommendations. So let's start now with Jocelyn. So Jocelyn, you have 10 minutes sharp to do your presentation. I don't know if you have any slides. Yes, we do. So the next slide. So that's the program for today, and that's the slides for.
Okay. Thank you all to be here. So I'm Jocelyn Guinche. I'm a French farmer. I'm farming. Okay, I'm farming with my associate, Sylvain, that most importantly is my friend, that I met during my studies. We had a dream when we were studying is to be farmers, but we had a big problem is that our parents were not farmers. So we had to wait an opportunity to be able to become farmers. And 7 years ago, this opportunity came in the west part of France, where we were able to put our hands on a mixed farm. From this, we had to build a business plan to convince bankers that we could be good farmers, but more importantly, we also had to convince our girlfriends that we would become farmers, and that was another topic. So currently on the farm, we raise cattle, cow calf, 30 mother. We also have beef cattle for meat production that we raised around 150 cows per year. We also have pork production, around 700 pigs per year, and arable, around 150 hectares. So how did we enter in carbon farming? So as I said, after our studies, we had to go to work because the opportunity of becoming farmer was not there. So we had the chance actually to build a job experience before to become farmer. We also had the chance to join group trainings as we started as a farmer. And thanks to those group trainings, we were able to link carbon emission of our practice with economical, let's say, figures. Thanks to that, we get some new, let's say, elements, new tools to try to manage our business. And as you can see, it's a short graph. Sorry, I didn't translate the titles, but generally it shows that more, let's say, a farm is efficient with greenhouse gas emission. More it's efficient with this, and more it's a profitable farm. So we try to take that in consideration, and we developed a practice on our farm. So first of all, we knew that soil, we had to take a great care of it. So we started by establishing cash crop with minimum tillage. But to be able to reduce the soil cultivation, we had to grow cover crops because the soil doesn't stay in good condition if we don't have, let's say, plants to feed him. And we finally try to learn also in groups with other farmers how to read soil profile. And like this, we were able to monitor our practice. Another point that we think was important for us to continue to develop our farm, but also to reduce the risk, it was to diversify the productions. So with the crops, we try to introduce new crops that were, in one way, less using fertilizer. I would take as an example spring barley, that in our system, we are able to produce spring barley with only 30 kilo of mineral fertilizer. The other part of the elements are coming from organic fertilizer. I will explain you later how we use it. We also produce oilseed rape And we produce oilseed rape with organic fertilizer and with minimum tillage. And thanks to this, we can get some premium when we sell those production. And finally, flax, because flax is a plant that currently is in a good trend. So we thought that, let's take this, this possibility. It's also a plant that uses not so much fertilizer. We are able to diversify our crops, but we are not able to take production risk. And we have to be sure, actually, that we have markets in front. So that's why it's important for us to take a great care of what we will do of our crops. Another really important thing for us, and especially for carbon farming, is that we were able to change our practice of fertilization. We went from a system where we needed around 80 tons per year of mineral fertilizer to a system today that we are closer to 15 to 20 tons of mineral fertilizer that we buy. And this reduction was possible because we had the opportunity also to work with a biogas factory that was looking for farmland to spread their manure, their digestate, to be precise. And so we say, we have the possibility, and we replace this mineral fertilizer by organic fertilizer. This is a really positive thing in a way, but in balance, as you can see, we have to use heavy machinery to be able to implement manure fertilizer or organic fertilizer on a large scale, and it creates compaction in our fields. So now we are in a balance between, we use organic fertilizer, but we have to use or to cultivate a little bit our soil to be able to manage this compaction. So as you can see, farming, it's always a balance between positive or pros and cons. And I think that's why you will always hear a farmer complain, because it's never a satisfying situation. Anyway, the positive element also is that we are less sensitive to world, let's say, fertilizer market. Another thing is that we love our animals, and we were not going to stop animal production, even if we are in a carbon farming, let's say, practice. So we say, no, we have to use our animals, and we keep them, and we use our animals to let's say, create revenue on a natural area, like permanent pasture. But for this, we had to be, let's say, efficient. So we had to try to reduce the amount of unproductive animals. That was one of the key to finally create less gas from them. And also, we try to keep low input management practice. All this together, we think that it creates a system where we can maintain natural habitat, natural environment, and we think it's beneficial for biodiversity. So we had those first group of cows, and finally we thought, maybe we don't have enough animals because our farm were a bit too much on the arable side. And we thought we have to find a way to be able to valorize more the grasslands, because we saw the really nice, let's say, outcome, agronomic outcome that is coming from them. And we say, okay, let's find a production that will help us to valorize the grasslands. And we drilled multi-species grasslands to feed new animals on the farm. It's this, let's say, cattle feed fattening unit that we grow. Thanks to that, we were able actually to supply a regional market. And we are really proud of this production, because you can find it in the best restaurants of Paris, like the Jules Verne in the Eiffel Tower, for example. Farming is special. We like to say that we produce with passion sustainable food that we can sell with profit, because yes, economic is a big thing in farming, and that we will always have to think on the economical side, what is it? And I really think also that if we want that more European farmers goes into carbon farming, they will need to have some economical guarantee, because it's a lot of change that they have to apply on their system. and it takes time and money. So I have to say that it's a bit special, but on the politics side, I would say I am for the moment a little bit lost with the choice of the European Commission that are working on free trade agreements, and they put us actually in competition with people that are not probably using the same ideas of sustainable farming that we have. So the feedback after 4 years is that we found profitability by carbon farming because we optimize the use of energy, inputs, and we get feed autonomy, so it means less cost to produce. We would like probably to get some reward, but we are still not part of a carbon farming scheme. In fact, we didn't find methodology that was able to analyze a mixed system like we've got. I still keep and really believe that we have to increase the communication toward farmers because, as I said earlier this morning, not a lot of farmers finally knows about carbon farming and what is going on at the European level. And I really think that a really positive thing would be to finance training groups because it's when farmers are together that they find solution. And I think that they need advisors, they need people that will help them to think about the system, and that's an important thing that should be subsidized, I think, from Europe. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. So now, well, your time was over, as you could hear. So when I get up, it means that you only have 1 minute left. I didn't say it in advance for you, but you were perfectly in time. So Celia, the floor is yours, and please.
Yeah, thank you. So hello everyone. Also thank you, Jocelyn, for this presentation from the field. So now I'm going to present you our feedback on assessing the carbon footprints on French farms and their transition potential level. So I'm working in Agrosolutions. So Agrosolutions is an engineering consultancy specializing in agricultural transition. And our team has supported various organizations in the agricultural sectors in developing calculation methods in order to assess carbon footprints, but also digital MRV tools to calculate these carbon footprints. So, yeah. So in France, we have a voluntary carbon certification framework. The name is the Label Bas Carbone. And it was established in 2020. And additionally, the government has introduced subsidies in order to encourage farmers to carry out carbon footprints on their farm. So with these subsidies, the farmers can calculate the baseline. So it means the initial state of GHG emission linked to fertilization, fossil fuel consumption, but also soil carbon storage. And to support farmers to carry out these calculations, with Agrosolutions, we developed a Tier 3 MRV tool, which name is Carbon Extract. So this tool has been used to carry out more than 1,500 carbon footprints. So it means the baseline, but also simulation of new carbon farming practices. And from our experience, we have observed that implementing carbon farming footprints is, and implementing carbon farming project is quite complex because it requires a lot of specific calculation from the farm. And we cannot predict easily the impact of carbon farming practices because it will be very specific on each context of each farms. So MRV tools are essential to measure and to scale up the deployment of these carbon farming practices. So how does this MRV tool help the farmers to make a carbon farming project? So when we use this tool, the first step is to calculate the baseline. So it means the initial state of GHG emission, you can see in purple, and soil carbon removal, you can see in orange. So to calculate the soil carbon storage, we use a humic balance calculation tool. It's the AMG model that is implemented in France. And so when we calculate the soil carbon storage, we will take into account the carbon inputs from, for example, cover crops or crop residue, organic amendments. And we take also into account the carbon output through mineralization. So when we have a soil carbon storage negative, it means that we have lower carbon input than carbon outputs. And when we have a soil carbon storage that is positive, it means that we have higher carbon input than carbon outputs. So here you can see the result that we can have with this MRV tool. So after calculating the baseline, the objective with this MRV tool is to simulate different transition pathways. So it means simulating different carbon farming practices. So it's really important because here we can have a big gap between the carbon farming, the maximum potential of carbon farming practices, and when we apply real carbon farming practices on real condition of each farm, we can see that the gap can be significant with theoretical-based scenario. So here you can see that the tool allows to calculate the evolution on GHG emission, soil carbon storage, and also the net balance, which is the difference between GHG emission and soil carbon storage. And to simulate these specific carbon farming, the farmers usually work closely with their technical advisors in order to see what's the best practices and best combination of practices to implement in their farms. So then the third step consists in calculating the total amount of carbon credit that can be generated through carbon farming practices. So then when the farmer sees the best suitable combination of practices, he can engage in a project with the label bas carbone, for example, and see what's the total number of carbon credit generated. And finally, the last step consists in monitoring the project progress. So we will see the evolution of GHG emission, but also soil carbon storage over the entire duration of the project. So it's usually a 5-year project for arable crop simulation in the label bas carbone. So now I'm going to present you some results we have with the farm carbon footprints and their transition potential based on calculation with our MRV tool. So here all the calculations are made at the farm level, but the map shows the result aggregated at regional level in France, and then the graph below shows the results aggregated at national level. So we are not going to look closely to all the results, but I will just introduce the main results. So we can see here that French farms generate GHG emission mainly from fertilization, fossil fuel consumption, and other agricultural activities. And at national level, it represents around 3 ton equivalent CO2 per hectare per year. And in orange, we can also see that soil carbon storage in most of the farms in France is negative. So it means that soil carbon stocks are decreasing over time. And we can see the same trend in most of the region in France. But the result can vary significantly from one farm to another. And just after, I'm going to show you a little graph on it. And so now we can see the results when the farmers implement a combination of carbon farming practices. So we can see that more than 60% of farms' carbon transition potential comes from improving the carbon footprint on the soil carbon pool. So it means reducing soil CO2 emission or net carbon removal. But this potential is better than the potential on the reduction of associated GHG emission linked to fertilization, for example, or fuel consumption. And for many farms, the transition potential is to reduce soil GHG emission before achieving net carbon removal. We saw that reducing soil CO2 emission is around 0.66 ton equivalent CO2 per hectare per year, while net carbon, soil carbon removal is around 0.27 ton equivalent per hectare per year. So here the CRCF could be a good opportunity to recognize soil CO2 emission credits, but also net carbon removal credits. And it could be an incentive-based carbon certification scheme. Another key consideration is how to calculate the baseline. So should it be specific, so for example, based on the farmer's real practices, or should it be standardized, so based on average carbon farming practices from a given production area? So we analyzed the result from our database, and we saw that so here you can see the carbon storage assessment on the baseline. And we see that across all the farm, there is a significant variability for the soil carbon storage results. We can see that half of the farm shows decreasing soil carbon stocks, while the other half shows increasing soil carbon stocks. So these findings highlight that soil carbon storage is highly sensitive to soil and climate condition, but also to each carbon farming practices, or to each practices of all the farmers. So to ensure an accurate estimate of the climate benefits, it's important to take into account the farm-specific baseline. Yes, so I see that the time is flying. So to conclude, our experience has shown in deploying these carbon farming projects in France has shown that it's not easy to predict the baseline calculation and the transition potential of farms. So MRV tools are essential to measure and support the project implementation. So if you want additional detail, we have a poster there, so we will be presenting it on the station later. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Celia. You were right on time. And now I leave the floor to Mathieu for the next.
Thank you, Suzanne. So I'm really glad to be here today to present in front of you the Impact for Soil platform. So my name is Mathieu Nogues. I work at INRAE, and I'm ORCaSa project manager. So just to present to you very briefly, ORCaSa is a project which aim was to launch the Soil Carbon International Research Consortium. And one of the services this consortium will provide to the international community is this platform. So I would like first to start with acknowledgement to all the ORCaSa partners who contributed to develop this platform, and especially to the team who co-coordinated and co-developed the launch of this platform, so the CIRAD, Visuality, and INRAE team. So Impact for Soil is a science-based aggregative and cooperative platform. So its main objective is to give science-based evidence to practitioners on soil carbon at an international level, to put the light also on understudied region or practices, and to align research efforts on soil carbon at an international level. So today I'm going to focus on the two models. There are 5 models in this platform, and I'm going to focus on the 2 really dedicated to soil carbon farming practices. But just for your information, there are 5 models. So geospatial data is a model which highlights maps on soil carbon content, soil carbon evolution, biomass. Network is another model which provides information on organization and research project on soil carbon, and datasets provide datasets from trusted sources. So I'm going to start to present to you the scientific evidence. So it's a model dedicated to identify the most effective interventions and drivers on soil carbon. So this model is based on a work and a publication done by Billwan al. in 2023, where they gathered more than 13,000 scientific publications and 200 meta-analyses from 1910 to 2020 in order to gather information on soil carbon stock and soil carbon evolution. Thanks to this, we have now information on soil carbon depending of the type of land use types. So when you go on the website, you can choose the type of land use you want, so cropland, forest land, grassland, wetlands, or other land. And depending of the type of impact, you will have information. So here, for example, if we look at the land management practices, we have the different management practices like pyrogenic amendments, organic farming, agroforestry, and cover crops, and we can see how much carbon has increased on croplands thanks to cover crops. So here, for example, it's an increase of 20.8%, so it's not yearly, but it's from the beginning to the implementation of cover crops to when the analysis has been done. So it's from a few years, depending on the scientific publication, to a few decades. We can do the same for land use change. So for example, for cropland, we can see the impact of land use change on when we go from cropland to forest land to grassland and to other land. And we can see that, for example, the change of land use from cropland to forest land is the main driver to increase the soil carbon content in the soil. And we have also the same thing for climate change. So we can see here the different impacts of climate change interventions. So for example, we can see the impact of fire, warming, CO2 enrichment on soil carbon content in cropland. Here, it's the second module I wanted to present to you. So the first one was really to give scientific evidence on the key drivers. And here it's more how to implement these practices. So here it's more, the information are gathered on a map, and you can click there and find information on practices that are already implemented. So to do it, we used recognized sources as WCAT and FAO, and at an international level, we have more than 100 practices that are gathered on the websites. You can go on this and search by keywords, country, year, and intervention, and land use type, the information you need. And also, when you click it on the map, on the different type of practices that are highlighted, you will have information on the country where it's implemented, a small description of the activity, and also you will have the ability to find the source and the original post and paper on this practice. And also, you will have access to the organization and initiative which implemented these practices, and it's also linked to our network model, so you can see already what this organization and research projects are doing. So our main recommendation would be that we would never be able to fund and develop this platform without the funding of the European Commission. So we are really thankful for this, and it's really vital to continue to fund ambitious tools like this, and also to fund the maintenance and the updates of this platform. For example, we have already had a strong request to update Impact for Soil and to add AI-powered natural language interaction to make it easier for visitors to get answers to their question, and also to add multilingual accessibility, so even non-speaker would have access to this data. And also we intend to add a dedicated module for monitoring, reporting, and verification. So if you'd like to work with us in order to develop this platform even more and to update it, or to contribute to its funding, you are very welcome. So thank you for your attention. You have here the QR code for if you want to go on the platform and check the different functionalities, and also if you want to get in touch with us, here it's our email. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mathieu. So now the floor is to you, Anais, from IDELE, and then together with you, Niamh, Phelan from Teagasc.
So hi everyone, our presentation today is about ensuring access to knowledge on carbon farming. So we are three behind this presentation, so Niamh from Teagasc, Laurene from Climate-KIC, and myself from the French Livestock Institute. So first of all, a bit of context. There is a lot of information already available on carbon farming, but it's scattered across Europe and across different production systems. And there are multiple European projects working on carbon farming at the same time. So at the end, it's difficult to have a full, clear, and up-to-date knowledge repository. However, as Jocelyn highlighted it, farmers and advisors need additional skills to better understand carbon farming and implementing practices. So there are 4 projects, European projects with similar objectives on carbon farming and complementary actions that joined forces to create a knowledge repository. So ClieNFarms, about co-developing and scaling up systemic, locally relevant solutions to foster climate-neutral and climate-resilient farms. Climate Farm Demo, a project about the adaptation of agricultural production to climate change, and with a highlight on demo events to have farmers implementing low carbon practices, demonstrating these practices at demo events. Climate Smart Advisors is a project on strengthening the advisors' capacity to accompany farmers in the transition toward climate smart farming. And finally, Organic Climate Net is a pilot network enabling farmers to integrate organic climate farming. So what is the Farming for Climate platform? So it's an answer to the context I presented just before, providing knowledge on climate change, mitigation and adaptation. So an initiative by the different projects I've mentioned. It's an open access platform for field stakeholders. So the audience is really farmers, advisors and technicians. And it's a platform offering resources on carbon farming, including adaptation and mitigation measures, climate and carbon assessment tools, and also advisory methods and tools. This platform will be regularly updated, allowing users to contribute by proposing new or improved tools, practices, and methods. A first version will be launched in April this year, but it will be an incomplete version, and there is more to come in the next months. So here you have the global structure of the platform, again with the farming practices, the carbon assessment tools, and the advisory methods and tools. So concerning the farming practices, a library of practices have been developed in the frame of the ClieNFarms project, and the idea is really to make them accessible to farmers and advisors for different types of production systems. So by choosing the production system, you then have access to different thematic areas. And then for each type of practice, you have a fact sheet with metadata and detailed information on the practice and its impacts. The learnings and remaining challenges from this work on farming practices was that the carbon storage and GHG reduction is really dependent on the farm's production system and the pedoclimatic context. So it makes it difficult to have a single impact figure in the platform's fact sheet. So the local context will also influence the economic costs and benefits of implementing such farming practices. To answer these challenges, the ClieNFarm, so the 3 projects I've presented, have developed a semi-quantitative assessment approach, but at the end it cannot replace the local assessments and projections on the local scale. As for the climate and carbon assessment tools, so an inventory has been carried out in the frame of the Climate Farm Demo project, with a characterization based on the production systems and scope considered, the indicators calculated, the data inputs, and also the availability of the tools. So it led to a qualitative comparison of carbon audit tools based on sensitivity of the tools to different parameters and support to advisors. And now there is a work at the moment on a quantitative comparison of the European carbon assessment tools that and we will have the results this year. Finally, the advisory methods and tools. So selection and description of these tools has been carried out in the frame of the Climate Smart Advisors project, and it includes not only technical advisory tools, but also facilitation tools, communication tools, and support to change tools. And the objective is really to support advisors in their work of accompanying farmers on carbon farming. And within the Climate Smart Advisors project, there are communities of practices, and the advisors have really the opportunity to add their own tools, to give feedback on the existing tools and potential adaptation to different contexts. So the three main topics I've just mentioned are really updated all along the different project, and the idea is really to have feedback also from the users. So additional to this Farming for Climate platform, there are two other platforms, so the EU Farm Book and the JRC Farming Practices Evidence Library. So the scope are a bit different between these three platforms. The first one is on agriculture and forestry knowledge. The second one has really a focus on mitigation and adaptation to climate change. So between these two first platforms, there will be an API to be developed to make links between both platforms and make sure there are no overlaps between the two platforms. And as for the Farming for Climate platform and the JRC platform, so the scope of this second one is effects of farming practices on sustainability outcomes, so not only climate change. And the audience are a bit different, farmers and advisors for the first one, and research audience and policymakers for the second one, so potential collaboration needs to be defined between these two platforms.
So I'm working on the ClieNFarms project, and the ClieNFarms project is developing something called microlearnings, which are short online modules. They only take a couple of minutes to complete, and they have a mixture of elements within it, so interactive elements, videos, reflective and knowledge-based questions, and these are being used to increase knowledge and engagement. They're being targeted at farmers, advisors and students to, so they can grasp key concepts quickly, and we're using them in something called blended learning, where we combine online learning and then your typical face-to-face learning through seminars, workshops and on-farm training. And in particular in the ClieNFarms project, we're using a model called the flipped classroom model, where learners consume some of the content before coming to the on-farm events. And this puts your learners at a similar knowledge base, and it allows for on-farm events to be used for deeper discussion, facilitation, and also practical on-farm skills instead. With the microlearning content, we're using a multilingual system, so we'll be releasing our content in English and local languages as well, because we're aware that we don't want to release all of our content just in English. Over the next couple of months, we'll be building partnerships with agricultural schools and advisory organisations that the microlearning contents will be used beyond the lifetime of the ClieNFarms project. So I'm just going to hand you back over to Anais for the recommendations.
So I have 1 minute left to present you our recommendations. So first one, to have a repository with trusted sources and consolidated across Europe. This repository needs to be dynamic with updates. It has to be adapted to the needs of the field stakeholders and also permanent. It means that permanent funding is needed to manage and maintain the repository. And the other recommendation is about capacity building, so make sure that there are practical, this capacity building for farmers and advisors cover practical implementation and economic aspects. That this approach takes a systemic and context-specific approach with pedagogical best practices, and it has to begin at the educational level, so integrating carbon farming into high school and agricultural school. And finally, it has to be publicly funded or supported through policy framework to ensure the accessibility of these trainings to all the farmers and the advisors. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. I don't know how you do, but you're always spot on time. And now the floor is yours, Natasha.
Thank you. So hi everyone, today I'm going to talk to you about the creative arenas, which is a participatory approach that was used within the ClieNFarms project. So this is all about linking in with the wider network of stakeholders and focusing this on how we can actually help the farmer implement solutions on farm. So quickly, just to go over how the ClieNFarms network works. So firstly, we have the demonstration farm. So this is generally a research farm that is the primary farm for kind of implementing and testing initial solutions to reduce emissions and increase carbon sequestration. So then following on from this, we have the lead commercial farms. So these are kind of the pioneering commercial farms that would implement these solutions and kind of start testing out and trying out these new solutions. And then linking in with these two kind of demonstration and lead commercial farms, we have the outreach farms. So these will kind of gain knowledge and learnings from the lead commercial farms and the demonstration farms to start implementing these solutions throughout the country. So going into what the creative arena is. So it's a group that brings together different stakeholders, and for the sake of the creative arena for ClieNFarms, this was for a conversation on reducing emissions and increasing carbon sequestration. So this is about co-constructing local solutions and getting these implemented on farm going forward to actually for mitigation against climate change. So today I'm going to go over two case studies. So this is the Irish dairy example and the creative arena on the arable side for the French network. So there was a range of different stakeholders present at each of these creative arenas, ranging from the farmers themselves, their advisors, through to research academia, and then policymakers such as DAFM were present in the Irish one, through to the processors, so the cooperatives. So we really wanted a big range of stakeholders to get all the opinions across to get these solutions implemented on farm. So the workshops were very much participatory. We wanted active discussion, everyone encouraged to talk. We wanted everyone's opinions heard within the room. So this was generally, instead of lecturing the different stakeholders, it was very much about getting subgroups together, having active discussions, followed by whole group discussions of the entire plenary room. So to go into the Irish workshop, so we had 4 main activities throughout the day. So the first one was where we gave them this map you can see here in the corner and asked all the stakeholders kind of add solutions onto post-it notes of solutions they could all think of to reduce emissions and increase carbon sequestration. Following on from this, we gave them a set of 10 solutions which were already depicted by the ClieNFarms project and asked them to rank these in terms of likelihood to implement on the dairy farm and the impact that these solutions would have on the reducing emissions. Followed by this, we then looked at the high-impact solutions and asked everyone to think of the barriers and prerequisites to actually get these implemented on farms and to get the opinions of the different stakeholders within this. We then looked at what farmers actually need to get these solutions implemented on farms and what the different stakeholders in the room could offer these farmers to get this to happen. So to go into a few of the results from the Irish side, these were the top 5 solutions for getting likelihood of implementation of the solutions on farm. So you can see here, the top 4 here were all generally related to slurry spreading or fertilizer application. So low emission slurry spreading, low emission fertilizer, and then replacing synthetic with organic, and then the timing of fertilizer application. Then the 5th one here was a bit different on saving energy within the milking platform. So then if we look at the impact, so the high-impact solutions were generally related to carbon sequestration and generally to do with kind of nature side. So we've got increasing hedgerows and trees, conversion to nature and forestry, and agroforestry as well. And then the 2 remaining ones here is the use of low-emission synthetic fertilizer, which is also seen in the previous results as a high likelihood of implementation on farm, and then re-wetting of organic soils. So these are some of the main messages that came out of the brainstorm sessions within the Irish creative arena. And the 2 here is that the farmers really wanted clear guidelines and no mixed messages. And I was really happy to see in the plenary discussion this morning from DAFM that this was a clear message that came out of this, that the farmers don't need to get mixed messages, one from a processor, one from policy, one from advisors. There really needs to be consistency across all stakeholders. And to do this, we really need education and training of the farmers, but also of the range of stakeholders that are talking to the farmers as well. And to do this, they also want information on a variety of aspects before they implement solutions on their farms. They really want to know the impact in terms of its ability to reduce emissions, also the economic costs, and then if there's any side effects related to these solutions that they're implementing in farm. And then linking it back to credit, they want either credit through sustainability schemes or through potentially carbon credits going forward. So now just to go into the French side and their creative arena. So they took a similar approach with kind of subgroup role-play-based games, plenary sessions, and then they also identified and ranked solutions on farms in terms of implementation and impact, and also the pros was looking at a regional action plan and how this could be implemented in France. So this is some of their results. You can see here, these are some of the solutions from the French stakeholder group that are high impact and high likelihood of implementation on farm. So the first one here is increased cover crops, and then they also had use less emitting fertilizers. So this solution was seen in both the arable French creative arena as well as the dairy Irish creative arena. So this was seen across both scenarios. And then you can also see the ones there at the bottom on implying more organic N and organic matter and reducing organic N fertilizers. These were also seen across both countries and across the two different agricultural sectors. So then the French group looked at how this regional action plan could be implemented for the country and kind of the benefits of this regional action plan. So they depicted that it would strengthen collaboration among stakeholders, creating greater impact, would reduce the risk sharing and increase the grant opportunities for increasing sustainability and reducing emissions. There would also be enhanced training and give positive communication on climatic situations and reducing emissions, increasing carbon. They also thought this would avoid competition if there was just one scheme, avoid the competition among different schemes and also across the entire value chain. It would also enhance the amount of research that could be undertaken and all going towards kind of the one focus, the one regional action plan, rather than lots of different plans being created. So now just to conclude on some of the key messages that came from both creative arenas on how this multi-actor approach and really linking in with a wide range of different stakeholders is beneficial. So firstly, it creates the discussion and opportunity for these different stakeholders to get in a room and really have the conversations. It gives the stakeholders a chance to appreciate each other's point of views, create collective intelligence and come up with new ideas, empower the farmers and kind of give them perspective on how they could really implement these solutions and the benefits to themselves. Gather knowledge to help these farmers implement solutions. And finally, the importance that is not just on the farmer to get these solutions implemented. There really is an importance on actions being done by non-farmer actors to facilitate the transition to low-carbon agriculture. And with that, thanks, and I'll pass you on to the next speaker.
Thank you, and my presentation is the last one before we have a quick feedback speech from Jocelyn, and then the floor will be open to Q&A from the room, so bear with us. My name is Laurene Lebelt. I work for Climate-KIC, and continuing on Natasha's presentation, I'm going to present a few more learnings from the ClieNFarms network for farm climate innovation, which is called I3S. I'm going to tell you a bit more about what that means. So I3S, this acronym is for Innovative Systemic Solution Spaces. To put it simply, these are groups of farms that work together in the ClieNFarms project. They work together also with the other stakeholders that are in their local ecosystem, and they work together to test and implement innovative solutions to address their local climate challenges in a systemic way. So these are all the different groups of farms that we have in the project. So they work in different pedoclimatic contexts, they work in different production systems, and they are all developing their approaches to climate smart farming. As Natasha was saying, each of these groups of farms, they did some workshops that we call Creative Arena, and this helped them together with their connected stakeholders to develop action plans. So I won't go into the detail of all the plans here, but you can see that each group of farms chose a selected list of solutions to implement and to test and monitor the results. But then, of course, farmers are not alone in the climate transition. They need to work with their connected stakeholders, and testing these solutions is just the beginning. So in the project, we also thought about how to go one step further and how different stakeholders from policy to industry can also get into that dynamic to have discussions about projections and scenarios for adopting climate farm practices at a wider scale. So one thing I wanted to share today was a focus about business model approaches and how that connects with rewarding mechanisms such as the CRCF for our session today. So some of the most common business models that were tested within ClieNFarms in these different value chains and groups of farms. For some of them, it was price premiums for result-based measures. The training and capacity building was also a very important part of these business models. We also have examples of industry collaboration, procurement examples as well. And of course, several of the groups of farms were also involved in carbon crediting schemes, such as Lebelt by Carbon in France. And on this, I have a few recommendations to share from Laure Nitschelm, who unfortunately could not be here today. So these are recommendations that emanate from the French Arable Crop Group. So French Arable Crop Technical Institutes have been working together, Arvalis, Terres, Inovia, ITB, also in connection with the Lebelt by Carbon, to try to improve and provide feedback from the field on how the system works. And this could be very useful for implementation at EU level as well. So one of the first points is that on data, farmers already have a lot of data to share, to upload to different accounting or regulatory systems. Sometimes with little explanation on how the data is used, why it's required exactly. So here there were two recommendations coming from the group. First, trying to simplify the systems to lighten the administrative burden. This is something we've heard a lot from all farmers in Europe in the past month. But also, of course, provide more transparency in the use of data. And so this means for farmers, but also other actors in the value chain, and this could really help empowering farmers and creating more trust. Secondly, in France, we have an issue with the carbon market per se, is that the current carbon market does not cover the break-even cost of a significant proportion of projects. So to make the system work, we would need higher selling price for carbon credits, or really blended approaches where we combine carbon credits with other sources of financing, such as sector premium. And we also need to design the system so that farmers can sell carbon credits and also receive potential funding from companies that follow SBTi rules. And here, also something that has been discussed for quite some time is the need for clarification regarding double counting issues. And of course, as well, the CRCF is mainly dealing with carbon storage and soil management GHG emissions for now. But there is really a need to have a global understanding of climate-smart farming approaches, also taking into account GHG reduction approaches. In some specific cases, there can be conflicts between GHG reduction and carbon storage. Maybe we can discuss that with Jocelyn later, but it's really necessary to address the two together. And so while taking into account that data collection still needs to be manageable, we need to have systems that take into account multiple criteria for sustainability assessment to have a systemic approach. Last but not least, we are also here have some recommendations that come not only from ClieNFarms, but from other projects as well, is that in general, changing practices in farming, it's not only a question of cost. We've seen that in other presentations also earlier today. It's also a question of skills, of workload, of risk taken by different actors. So, for example, when we talk about additionality criteria for the CRCF, it should not be only about an economic evaluation. It should take into account also the other types of investments and risk that are taken by the farmers in that situation. And of course, the last point that is still up in the air is about first movers. How do we reward farmers? How do we support farmers that have already been implementing carbon farming practices on their farms? There are a lot, like Jocelyn, who have already taken initiatives because they were seeing an interest in that beyond carbon credits. How do we make sure that these are rewarded and that we also maintain the carbon stocks in the long term? Thanks a lot for your attention. If you need more information, there will be posters about these projects in the poster room tomorrow, also about live carbon farming. And we're also available for questions later. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So now the floor is yours if you want to take it and wrap up maybe what you've heard. About from the other experiences. Well, you're the only farmer in the panel, but from what I've heard, I think that a number of questions that you addressed in your presentation about working with other farmers, you see that there's a possibility with other things, the platforms that are existing to find solutions. So what are your thoughts of what you have heard within this panel?
Okay, so it's never an easy task, let's say, to make a conclusion. But I have to say that in a first step, I'm really happy finally to be here because it's that I discovered that already a lot of things are happening. I see that they are still localized with some groups, with some companies. Unfortunately, our farm is located in an area where there wasn't such a type of group as a cooperative that were into it or transformators. So we were not lucky enough to know about such things. I really appreciate actually the presentation where it was shown this idea of starting from demonstration farm after to go to some, let's say, more, let's say, farmers that could be a kind of a showroom to others. Mm-hmm. And I actually believe by the experience that I had previously in my, before to be a farmer, that it's always like from the road or over the edge that farmers are taking ideas or they are thinking, oh, what is he doing again? And I really think that it could help actually to push people to go forward regarding carbon farming and do better or differently the job. I see that people are working on the methodology. Mm-hmm. When I speak with the specialist, I observe that generally there is a scale problem because those tools and those measurements are extremely expensive and needs to be run on large acreage. Mm-hmm. That some systems in Europe or some farming context do not fit because, for example, in our department, the farm is generally around 100 hectares and not 10,000 hectares like I heard this morning when I was speaking about it. So it will be complicated indeed to try to group the people in the same way, to say them that let's have a project together. I'm currently a bit afraid about it. But I think that with the new generation, generally, we are looking for new ideas because we arrive to a point in our systems where I think we observe that the age of all of the farmers in Europe is extremely high. Mm-hmm. And that we have a statistic in France that say that in the next 10 years, probably the half of the farmers will be retired. We have to find new volunteers, like Sylvain and me did, to take those farms. And I think to give a really nice actually view of farming, because to be a farmer is a great job, I have to say. We have to deal with plenty of problems, but at the end we are extremely proud when, like I said during the presentation, we grow the food that feed the cows that at the end of the day finish on the best table of France. I have to say that we take a big pride. We are extremely proud of it. And I'm sure that a lot of young people out of the farming, let's say, family cycle could be interested to do this job. And carbon farming can be, I think, a nice entry for a lot of people that don't know a lot about farming, but that could be interested about nature, about biodiversity. And at the end, the idea is that I think we have to link this nice view or idea that we show of farming to try to push people to become farmers, and also link it with the reality that is actually the economy. So it needs to interest people that farming needs to be profitable. And also I think that we have to work on the time. The working time in farming is generally a little bit without limits. And to make farming, I think, interesting and realistic to people, it should be also a bit more managed. As we also work on the farm, we try to avoid, we have holidays, we have weekends, we can live like everybody, but it's thanks of, because I think we just change the way of thinking to do it. So if we can generalize this type of ideas, I really think that it will be the future for European farming.
Okay. Well,
I don't know if I answer after the question.
Well, thank you very much. Are there any questions in the room? I know that there are two persons with mics, Maria there and another person here. Are there questions? Yes, there is one down there.
Do you want to use the Menti questions like we did before? Because I prepared them.
And we can also ask online, so we can display the Menti if people who are online would like to ask questions. But let's start with the room.
Thank you.
Can you please introduce yourself and before asking your question?
Okay, thank you. Tom O'Dwyer from Teagasc, and a question for Jocelyn. I'm just curious about your motivation for the transition that you've made on your farm, because I think it sounds like from your presentation that your primary motivation was around the success of the business, the financial success of the business, with climate perhaps being secondary. But maybe you could just discuss that a little bit, please?
Yes, so it's true that we changed our practice. Actually, we knew that we had to go to more sustainable practice all over our farm. At this time, 4 years ago, carbon farming was in the pipes, I would say, but not really promoted at such a level as now. And we said with Sylvain, we can't afford to wait, because we were still in a situation where energy was relatively cheap, in a system where we had no reward possible because there wasn't credit carbons to sell, more or less. So we said with Sylvain, we have to do something, because if we are pioneers, if we start now, it will be much less difficult for us to after, let's say, fit what will be the normality. I don't know if it's extremely English, but what will be normal for the future, let's say, to have sustainable practice. So with Sylvain, we tried to say, okay, we are young, we are a bit crazy, we are not scared about let's say, our parents that have this, let's say, pressure on us, like you need to succeed and you can't fail because it's the family farm. No, we didn't have this pressure. So we let our mind try to give some ideas, but to stay practical and pragmatic, we put all our ideas on the paper to evaluate let's say, the consequences of what we would do. And we figure out that if in the first step it was not really, let's say, economically speaking, we didn't have, let's say, justify. At least we were prepared to face an energy crisis. And I don't know if it's, I don't think it's a good thing, but finally, 2 years later, this energy crisis arrived. And we already were half prepared, I would say, to face it, because we already implemented things on it. So we said, at least we were a little bit in advance. We didn't take all these big waves of cost on our farm, and we were happy to say that we finally have an example of what is to be sustainable. It means that we are economically efficient. We try to respect more and more the ecology, the biodiversity, the environment, and we still have practice that are not taking us a huge amount of time, because it's just we are replacing our practice. We are not putting or we are not adding practice to what we do. So we still keep our kind of let's say comfort of work, where we still have holidays and everything. So it was. It's true that in the first step it was not linked straight with the environment, but at the end of the day everything merged, and we see that we had probably a good idea when we started to work on it.
Okay, there's another question in the room, but I remind people online, if you want to ask a question, the code is 71995403, like you can see on top of the screen. So that's the Menti code if you want to ask questions from online. Thank you. So let's take the question in the room, please.
Thank you. Rachel Madeley-Davis, AHDB in the UK. I'd be interested to know the panel's thoughts in terms of the barriers for tenant farmers in accessing carbon farming and what their views are on that, please. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question.
Oh,
Can you
sorry.
repeat slowly?
Slower,
maybe?
sorry. Talk very quickly. Yes, I'd be interested to know what the panel's thoughts are in terms of the barriers for tenant farmers. So those farmers that might be on short tenancies, whether that's sub 5 years or even longer, in terms of how they can really access the markets in terms of carbon markets.
So it's a question to the whole panel. Okay, Sylvia?
Yeah.
Sylvia or Teagasc?
Sorry. No, it's about farmers that are tenants, so farmers that rent. About farmers that rent their land, if I understood well, yeah. And some of the farmers may have short-term. They may be renting for short term, some may be renting for a longer term, but how does that affect carbon farming initiatives, and is that a barrier for making plans for this type of action? How do, for example, yourself, you are renting your land, if I understood well, so how does that affect the way you approach this topic?
So I'm happy to speak. I would like also that there will be questions for others. But so to answer you, yes, we are on 99% of our lands are rented. For me, for example, agroforestry solutions are a big problem to implement on my fields. I say my fields, but they are not mine. When I speak with my landlord, could I plant, I don't know, 100 trees per hectare in lines all over the fields? Are you okay? Generally, they say me, I don't know. And after, if I explain them, yeah, but you understand, I could get additional incomes coming from carbon credits sales. They start to think, and they say me, okay, so maybe the rent is not anymore linked with the capacity of those lands, and I see that you can get more maybe from the land, so should I raise my rent? That's a question. If I plant trees, I would like probably a return on the long term. At least I would say, I'm not a specialist, but at least 20, 25, 30 years. It's true that if we have a short-term rent, 2-3 years, are we sure that after those 3 years we will still be a renter of those fields? As the pressure on lands becomes bigger, I think. That's a big, big question. And I agree with you that to implement such a type of carbon farming, let's say, tools, it's extremely complicated for farmers. And it's probably one of the key that explain why it's not practice that are developed largely in the countries, because I speak about France, but the majority of French farmers are renters. They are not land owners. And such problems will appear in every farm. So it can't help actually to develop such a system.
And if I may add to that, I think that's a topic that's going to be explored in other sessions, but the question of accounting in carbon crediting schemes and the distribution of value and risk among all the different actors that are involved in the farming systems, so the farmers, the landowners, but also in the value chain, and from the farm to the agri-food business, like who can claim which part of the credits and who gets the benefits and who takes the risk. I think there are still big questions to be clarified on that, and rules and safeguards to be set to make sure everyone agrees and there is no feeling of frustration or unfairness in the system.
Thank you for that, Laurene and Jocelyn. We have a question from online. So in carbon farming, size matters. Don't smile. Do you think it would be helpful to understand the minimal size of the farm for carbon farming profitability? So this might be a question for Celia, maybe, because you have the experience with those 1,500 farms in France. So
yeah, sure. I think, yeah, size matter for the implementation of the carbon farming practices, but it's more on, I think the question is more on the engagement of a group of farmers for on a certification scheme, for example. In France, in the Lebelt carbon, we saw that most of the time it's a group of farmers that engage in a project, and it's very complicated to do it individually because you have the cost of administrative papers to do, the cost also for the verification, the cost of the tool. So they have many things to do while implementing a carbon farming project through a voluntary carbon scheme. So I think the question of size, it's more on how to reduce the costs while engaging a group of farmers. Yeah.
Okay. Is there another question in the room? Yes, Mr. You have a mic coming.
How would you know or describe a high-value nature credit? And is there a difference between a low nature credit and a high nature credit?
Sorry, we didn't.
Is there a difference? How would you describe a high-value nature credit? No, I describe it.
How do I describe? Sorry, I
don't
understand.
A high-value nature credit.
High-value nature credit?
Yes.
Yeah. How would you know it? I describe it.
Like for the price, for example, high value. How do we distinguish a high value for the price of the credit, or?
Yeah, a high nature credit value. The value of a high nature credit. How would you describe it? Or how would you know it?
Yeah.
There's a lot of talk about high nature credits and no nature credits.
Yeah, it's
what is the difference then?
It's difficult if I will understand the question, it's difficult to make a value on a carbon credit. In France, it's around 50 euros a carbon credit for different carbon farming practices. So it's on the carbon farming practices on reduction of GHG emission, but also on carbon removal. But when we see the cost, because we ask farmers to put how much they pay for the implementation of these new carbon farming practices, all the time it was much more higher. So for us, we would put the price of the credit really high compared to these 50 euros for the carbon credit. So it's difficult to say. I would say that it needs to correspond to the price they put in the new carbon farming practices, but it's very difficult to have a higher price today. And I don't know if there are some other feedbacks from other countries.
In fact, there will be sessions about rewarding mechanisms, especially on Thursday, that will tackle that question as well, with different schemes in which they're implemented. So this, corresponds also a bit to the question that is there: what is the minimum acceptable price point of the carbon credit? Well, you nearly responded to that. Apparently, there are 7 questions. Can I have another one? Are carbon farming, healthy soil and healthy food all related, or should we be thinking of holistic solution to food production? So who can I orient that question to? Let's say Natasha.
To be honest, very much not in my area, but let me read the question again. I guess you need both. You need to increase the soil health, to increase the soil carbon. It all everything links in together. You have to consider the whole picture. You can't just focus in on one area. It's really about creating building blocks and adding in multiple solutions that can really be put together and implemented as one to really increase the amount of carbon or reduce the amount of emissions in total. I don't think you can just focus in on one aspect, say soil. It really is about bringing everything together.
Yeah, and I can add that one of the main recommendations coming out of last year's Carbon Farming Summit was the inclusion of co-benefits, including biodiversity criteria in the carbon crediting system. So we are making steps, I think, towards holistic approach. Of course, in many ways, we are still focusing on carbon, but more and more we see the importance and sometimes the fact that other aspects than carbon, environmental aspects, social aspects, can be the entry point in that kind of system for farmers, but also for other economic stakeholders in territories.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions in the room? No? Then let's take another one, a last one here. So this is to you, Jocelyn, again. What a success. Are you a Climate Farm demo participant? That's a simple question.
Yes or no?
No. But you could have been.
Yeah, but I didn't know that it exists.
Okay. So it's nearly time. Maybe we can come to some concluding remarks. Does any one of you want to make a point in 1 minute? So maybe Laurene, do you have one point that to sum up one idea that you would like to share with the room?
Maybe one idea is there was a presentation from Anais and Niamh and also Mathieu about knowledge repositories and how we can collect data on practices and on impact. And it's really important to have these repositories, but they really need to come alive, especially in the field. So that's why we also addressed capacity building and peer-to-peer learning. Knowledge repositories, if they are not translated and turned into action and accessible for farmers, farm advisors, they will not fulfill their purpose. So this is really something where we need to have a coordinated approach to support implementation. Thank you.
Thank you, Laurene. Can you pass the mic to your neighbor?
Yeah. I think a couple of things is, firstly, it was really interesting to see how it worked from the French farmer, the actual perspective on farm. In Ireland, we're not quite at that stage yet, so it's really interesting to see how this could potentially work going forward within Ireland. And then similar to what you were saying, it's making sure that these tools that happen and get created within the projects actually get used going forward. For example, with the micro-learnings, we're hoping to get these added to the IRAE sustainability tool, AgNav, so these can actually then get used further and ongoing to actually train advisors, give information to farmers, and that this information isn't just lost at the end of a project and it can be used going forward.
Thank you.
I think my point would be very similar to Natasha's as well, that the products from all these different projects will be used after it. And specifically within the microlearning contents, that they're integrated into agricultural schools and advisory organisations in different ways, be it AgNav or different action plans after the lifetime of the projects.
Thank you.
As for me, I will make the link with the economic impact of the carbon farming practices, because we talked a lot about the technical impacts and the economic impact on the farm. But we really need to focus also on the cost of the trainings and the capacity building for the farmers and the advisors, the time spent by the farmers and the advisors. So it's really all the cost around the fact of accompanying the farmers in this transition. So yes, just to mention this also.
Yes, we were talking, Jocelyn was talking this morning about knowledge gaps among farmers who doesn't always know a lot about cardboard farming. So I think the data repository we presented can really be useful to, when presented in a user-friendly way, to tackle these knowledge gaps.
And yeah, maybe one additional point, but it was linked to a question. It's like not forgetting the co-benefits we can have also, and not focusing only on carbon farming. It's the most easy indicators we can calculate on the farm, but it's really important to take into account all the other indicators on soil quality, water quality, or biodiversity. And so to implement these indicators in the MRV tool is also really important, I think. So the last word for you,
Yes, so I would say that I'm extremely optimistic, because I see that it's a subject that interests a lot of young women and men that have plenty of energy to work on those topics. I think farmers, they need help, because they are sometimes a bit alone in their farm, working a lot. And the fact that this energy will come to the farm with those new ideas, it could give, I think, more motivation to farmers to continue, and probably to have more pleasure doing what they do. So I'm smiling because I'm optimist when I see that.
Okay.
And that will be my word.
Thank you very much. So let's give a big applause to our panel. Well, and this is it. We're right on time. Thank you very much for your attention, and pleased to see you in next sessions.